Hello, and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and as always, I'm joined by the search engine wizard, Mike Smith, award-winning director, Brian Redondo, and Savon Jones, aka Captain Vonnie. This is episode 42, and we're peeling back the layers of Netflix's sensational hit, Squid Game. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Can I, before we actually start, Brian, while you're composing your thoughts, let me take this minute to just shout out the newest member of the Confidently Wrong Mafia.
Mafia. Gang.
My computer's freaking out. It clearly doesn't like this, but shout out to Wesley. Shout out to your lovely wife.
Woo!
To welcoming a new Nakamura into the world.
Hey.
Wow.
We are so
Nakamura.
happy for you. All the friends of the show are happy for you. And
Thanks,
then,
bro.
We're going to be expanding our audience into the 0 to 2 demographic. So,
Oh,
keep an
we're
eye out
cornering
for Paw
it.
Patrol content. Who
Who else? Daniel Tiger.
Yeah, things are going to be looking up here. The Backyardigans.
Backyardigans? I don't really know any of these shows.
Backyardians.
I've heard of Paw Patrol.
Blippy. We're coming for you, Blippy.
Uh-huh.
I think that's his name.
Blue's Clues? Maybe that's older. I don't actually know.
I think Blue's Clues still has.
We're actually gonna try and limit the screen time as much as possible, which is tricky because I consume a lot of
screen time.
Good
Yeah.
thing we do a podcast. So
Yeah, your
Screen
child
free.
is
Got that
not
covered.
only a podcast,
Screen
but a
free.
podcast solely about things that require screen time. So your child's going to learn the word hypocrite very quickly.
do what I say, not what I do.
I work
that's a
for Big
lovely way to
Oil,
go.
but I buy it and drive a Tesla.
But
they're
speaking
gonna-
of screen time, let's
Yeah.
talk about the
You ready?
biggest thing on the screens currently.
Oh my goodness. It's the rage. It's in the zeitgeist. It's all over the place. It's Squid Game. So, for those of you who live under a rock, Squid Game, what is it? Brian, can you tell us, for those people who maybe haven't seen it yet or maybe have heard about it but don't quite, haven't really dove in yet?
who are these people? If these people exist, they probably have never heard our podcast, nor do they know what podcasts are.
No way. Some people are just busy, bro.
Like
With
new
babies.
parents? I doubt
Yeah.
it. They're recording
Yeah,
podcasts
if
themselves.
your experience is anything of what new parenthood is like, all these people need to be listening to our podcast.
Hey, I've been chilling.
All right. Well, anyway, just to recap for the two people in the world that don't know what Squid Game is.
Two
It
of you.
is
What's
the
up?
hottest new show to erupt all over Netflix and everywhere, every other corner of the media landscape.
That sounded
And-
dirty, bro.
I mean, everything I said sounds dirty. So,
You're a parent now, Wesley. Jesus.
yeah, geez, Wes.
Let's have some
Gosh.
standards.
So Squid Game is a TV show, fictional, a dramatic TV show that comes out of Korea, and it's kind of in a similar vein as a Parasite, but Parasite meeting Get Out, meeting Saw, meeting Survivor. It's kind of got the energy of all those things together, because what this show is about is that 456 people in Korea are living in serious debt. And then they get invited by a very mysterious stranger to come play some children's games. That's right, children's games. But these are high-stakes children's games that they have to play in order to win a buttload of money, to basically reverse the trajectory of their lives, like to get them out of debt and to get them into that category of life of living the capitalist dream. So these high stakes games, when I say high stakes, I mean that all the contestants can live or die, essentially, from any of these games. And by kids' games, I'm talking about things like red light, green light. And so it becomes a really fascinating show over the course of, 9 or 10 episodes. of seeing what happens to all these contestants who are playing to win, also just playing to survive. And it's kind of a crazy ride, and has been a worthy bingeable piece of entertainment for, what is it, number one for like the past month already?
Yeah, I was saying before we started that based on, internet hype alone, quantitatively, Google searches, things like that, it's the biggest show Netflix has ever done. So that's compared against, The Crown, things like Stranger Things. So it's really not aimless hype to say the show is pretty meteoric.
Yeah, and it came out of nowhere too, and it's from Korea, right? It's a Korean language a TV show. So I don't even understand how any of that came into existence or why we're all talking about it. But here we are.
Now, spoilers are coming. So if you haven't seen this show, go watch it, or just be prepared that we're going to spoil it for you. And that's just too bad. Sorry, but not sorry. So first question to everybody. Did you watch dubbed or subbed? Savon?
I watched the first episode dubbed, but that was because I was cooking dinner while that was happening. So I didn't just listen to the dub on purpose because it's fun. That being said, and I'm somebody who watches a lot of anime, so I'm cool with dubs, I'm cool with subs. That dub was awful. That dub was, there's a lot of anime. Some are like okay, some are really good. This was actually bad. Like, it was bad enough to where I'm reading the subtitles and I'm also still listening to like the dubbing, and the lines are different enough to where I actually feel like I'm losing things. I'm like, oh, okay. So the dub is not only poorly acted, but I don't think really conveys the emotion and some of what they're actually saying. I 100% recommend watch it subbed. If not, and if you're not to subtitles, it's just like you can, I guess, but you're really doing a service to the actors.
The English translated subtitles were not the same as what they were speaking in English. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Because here is one critique I heard of the sub in this show, is that the sub was not directly kind of correlated with what the meaning of the writers were, and they were very intentional with the language of the show, which is not something we could really understand. Because anytime you're watching a sub, whether it's anime or whatnot, you can kind of feel things get lost in translation. So I think one argument people were making for the dub, and I did not watch the dub, I just heard the voice actors were terrible, and I think Brian can more passionately speak to that than I can. But the one argument for the dub in this show was that it was more kind of true to the actual language and intentions the writers had for the script, and that didn't particularly come across the sub. All that said, again, I watched the sub, and I think Brian, as someone that works in the industry, you can explain to us a little bit more about why it was so bad.
Well, you can't watch dub for anything. I don't even know why people would even start there. Aside from Savon's reason for cooking at the same time, I'll give that one a pass. But if you're going to watch a show that was created originally in a different language that you don't speak or understand, just go to the subtitles. Like, that's all it is. Otherwise, you lose everything from the performances of the people who are acting in that thing, whatever it may be. And, I think that's true across the board. Like, you're not gonna really absorb it the way it was meant to be absorbed if you're not watching subbed. But
there are some that are good, though. There are some that are good. We don't need to have that argument right now. Savon again would know more about that than me.
Yeah, you sure? Because I'm ready.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Let's not.
Cowboy Bebop, things like that, all have very good dubs to them. But
yeah.
It's also like it always like because the language coming out of people's mouths and animated things never really directly aligns anyway, and I think that's a really weird thing to watch in live action stuff. But maybe that's an argument we'll have for another time.
Yeah, I wonder if that's also like money, right? Like if you're Disney or Pixar and you can throw lots of money at actors to do a really great performance in a different language for an animated thing, maybe it could still turn out all right. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have a stake in the game, so I'm willing to go with Brian on this and just always default to the sub version.
So fun fact, I spent some time living in Europe a little bit, right? And over there, particularly in France, everybody is watching things dubbed. And I know for a lot of A-list Hollywood actors, they always have the same person dubbing that actor. So like Will Smith has his particular dub voice that French audiences are conditioned to accept. Like, this is how Will Smith sounds, really.
That's awesome. All right.
It's a weird world.
I was just gonna say it's just kind of weird that given how quality the show is, that they allowed for such a poor dub to come out. My thinking is, once Netflix got the final cut in Korea, it was too late, and they already had to divert all their resources to the Dave Chappelle PR nightmare, so they didn't have any money to put towards getting good dub actors. But that's just what I would think.
But I also wonder if they were thinking this show was going to be the hit that it is.
I
Wes is shaking
guess
his
no,
head no,
but it's not like a cheap show, and I guess that kind of connects to our next question: is like, why does this show work? But yeah, I mean, like, why do y'all think this show has captured the attention of so many people, and like, how did this just come out of nowhere and rocket up?
Well, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
A big chunk of this is us just being super American centered, where we just think, oh, how could this possibly work? Because we're like, wondering, oh, why the dub wasn't great? I'm like, yeah, but.
Oh, I just mean the show as a whole.
Yeah, but still, like, you can have a big budget behind something, and clearly, based on what they decided to put their money and time towards, the dubbing wasn't as important. And
yeah,
that's just one of those things where it's like, hey, Americans and English-speaking audiences weren't the main primary audience, and this is what it looks like when you're not the main audience. This is how everyone in every other culture has felt when they're getting there. You're having something made where they're not the main audience. So,
but as you always say, it didn't happen to me until now.
Yeah, but that's just something I was like, yeah, this is what it's like. Maybe we can talk about the episode with the VIPs, but that was a perfect example of like, you damn Yankees. Now y'all know how literally the rest of the world feels.
Okay, well, like, just one pushback there, and then we can talk about the actual things of the show. Netflix has 3.8 million subscribers in Korea. Netflix in the U.S. has 74 million subscribers. So, in a way, the content is... I don't know. Maybe it wasn't, because the show was created for Netflix, correct? This wasn't like one of those things Okay, well, then maybe we need to pull that shit up. But anyway,
yeah, Google it.
The merits
Google
of the
Master.
actual show.
Oh yeah, but try not to curse as much. That takes me a while to bleep things out.
Oh, all right.
That's
you
fine.
Can cut that out.
Also, I have a baby now. You can't be cursing with a baby around.
Fair enough.
What the baby doesn't understand those words?
How do you know? Maybe they're
Babies don't
understanding.
speak English.
You just gotta be like, I love you, baby. I love you. I love you.
No,
You're the fucking best thing ever.
that's 3 beeps. 4.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, cut all that out and just jump into the next question.
Sounds good. No, well, so are we ready to answer this question now? The one you just started asking? Okay.
Yes.
So the only thing that I really want to talk about is just this show was brilliant. It's not the only show that's ever done this or the only like book that's ever done this, but the level of tension that was built into almost every moment of the show, I think makes it so that you can't look away, right? Because if you just tell me the premise of, well, you have to play games and you're going to win money, you wouldn't necessarily think like this is what you're coming up with. But the way that the writers and the directors or whoever, was making this, every choice, every moment, every minute, every look meant something, and the stakes were so high, right? Like after the first 45 minutes of the first episode, you realize what's at stake here. Any small mistake, any misstep, and you're probably going to end up dead, basically, right? And so every choice and every look is literally life or death for these characters. It's not like you have a way to make it up. You don't have a get out of jail free card. There isn't strategy here in terms of like, oh, you can earn immunity. Like literally everything you're doing as a contestant in this show has an enormous amount of pressure to it. And as a viewer, you are very aware of like the fear and the absolute terror that these people face as they're facing all of their decisions that they're making. I think the one place where this comes out like the most, I mean, obviously it's like every show, but where it's made clear to me in my head how important that was like choosing the vest, right? Choosing the vest wasn't actually the game. There wasn't any life or death consequence to choosing the vest, and yet they knew how important that was because it could make a difference based on what they had seen in previous games. It could make a difference in what chances they had in the next game. And so all of these things take on this huge amount of importance that like you cannot stop. Like I was like clenching like my like shirt. I was like palm sweating watching them try to pick a vest, and that wasn't even the game.
I'm glad but surprised you like the show that much. Like I had this pegged for a Brian, not Wesley show. So I will.
I don't
take
know
that
if
L
enjoy.
gladly.
Yeah, I don't know if enjoy is the right word though. But I couldn't stop watching because of how tense every single moment was, and I wanted to know what would happen next. And I knew we were going to talk about it on this show. But
Okay, well, fair enough.
So you did your homework.
I
is
did.
what you're
I
saying.
did. You know,
This is
I'm a good
this
student
is
through
a
and
prep
through.
work show now. So all of our listeners,
Prep
you're
fun,
welcome.
Mike.
We are putting our time in to give you high quality programming. Here is what I will say, because I think it's interesting in that one thing really doesn't rise to the top of any discussion of the show. And I think it's similar with a lot of things in the media, and particularly in the stuff we've really gassed up in this show. It's that this show is so violent, it takes violence to an almost absurdist way. But what's funny is that I feel like in so much of the stuff we consume in this country, ultraviolence is like the foundation of it. Like The Last of Us 2. Like, yeah, the game's super duper violent, but we don't lead with that. You lead with everything around that. But without the violence and the brutality, like it lays the foundation for all this stuff because it's so brutal. Invincible was the same thing, right? Like all these like very nice, touching moments and character moments all kind of build on the foundation of how ridiculously violent and just ridiculous the show is. And it's the same thing with this. It's like the first thing I wrote in my note for why the show has captured the attention is because it's so violent. Like you knew what was going to happen in the red light, green light episode, and it's still shocking when people start getting shot. I'd like if they like cut away from things or weren't so like vivid and graphic, I don't think all the other things in this show could work. So it's just like, I think we forget that in these discussions, and it's just so funny that like ultra violence is the baseline for a lot of these things that you just build off of, but then we don't talk about how ridiculous the violence is.
That's interesting. I don't think the ultra violence was what made this show so captivating to a lot of people, honestly.
No, I don't think it's what made it captivating, but could it have been captivating without it?
I think so. I mean, I think Squid Game this is one of those examples of, and we talked about this when we were having our Shang-Chi episode, of a lot of these big productions, and we talked about it when we talked about the Star Wars Disney Legends bit, but there's a lot of high quality stuff where if you just let the creative minds just do their thing and bring their vision to life, quality work will speak for itself. This was clearly something that was not made with an English-speaking audience significantly in mind, with just how awful the dubbing was. But, you know, it's not something you think would immediately appeal to a Western audience. And yeah, Netflix does have a big, you know, North American audience, but they have lots of other productions and people, you know, there's a lot of ways they can make their money. I think people just liked it because it was good. You know, I'm not even sure if I liked the show, but it was extremely well produced. The soundtrack, the production value, the acting, the pacing, it just did a bunch of just filmmaking stuff right. And because the whole battle royale, capitalism is evil, none of this is new. There's nothing that this show does that a million other mediocre American horror movies or parody shows haven't done already. So what makes it different? I don't think it's the violence, because when you're fighting over these life and death money games, the violence is a given. I think it was just well put together, and people like quality stuff. Like Wes, you know, I think you're in the boat as me, right? It was super violent and uncomfortable, and all that might not be what we're into, but you can't say it was poorly put together. You can't say there wasn't an attention to detail. And I think people authentically are attracted to that.
100%.
Yeah, it's kind of like those kind of what you're saying, Savon, mixed with I think what Wes was saying. It's like you're taking this formula that we know works, right? It's the reason why lots of reality TV shows just work and have an audience. Yet people are competing in a game that's somewhat high stakes, and there's a lot of interpersonal drama that happens related to said game, and you want to see the outcome. And so they're combining that with like the hyper violence and everything else, and packaging it in a way that is high quality, that has its own distinct personality and tone, that gives all those things more heft and weight and make it what it is. And suddenly you have like a kind of like the common denominator entertainment, which is like the reality side of it, mixed with the high quality stuff that you really just want to ingest. So like, anything that might be artful or whatever, maybe doesn't reach this kind of audience, but a show with this kind of plot line definitely does. And you're rewarded for it with every single episode because tonally and from a craft perspective, everything is just clicking.
I wonder if what you're saying actually made me wonder if the filmmakers are also critiquing the viewer, right? The fact that you're watching this show or into this show.
Oh, definitely.
Are we into bad TV? Right,
Mm-hmm.
like reality TV is not considered good TV, at least in the high and mighty circles. But it's so extremely popular. By watching this show that lampoons or that like analogizes capitalism and violence within the capitalistic system, is it also saying like you as a viewer, right, are being sucked into this thing that we made super compelling for you?
Yeah,
it's
we're
just
complicit.
very like it's very like circular and meta here.
It's like putting you in the shoes of like, if you were poor, if you were like in a ton of debt, would you join the game? And if you were super rich, would you go watch the game?
Oh yeah.
And most people would say no, right? If they're not in those positions right now, they would tell themselves, no, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But
we know we're getting the same entertainment value as the rich guests.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Oh,
that's terrible.
Well, the difference is we know it's fictional.
True.
Based on a true story.
Well, we also watch football, so
yeah,
True.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. All right. Moving on to our next question.
in the Olympics.
Is Squid Game a winner? Brian, you've got the first word.
Yeah, 2 thumbs up. Go watch it.
Boom.
It's fun. Like there's plenty there, that's satisfying from an entertainment perspective. It's, as Wes said, like the high stakes will just like keep you interested for a good 10 hours. But I also think, like Savon said, like the acting is great. Just like the art direction of the show, like the MC Escher staircases that people go through, the wide camera angles, the weird masks and costumes that people are wearing. It's all very interesting. And I think it's a solid show. Is it the greatest show? No, but it is very interesting and fascinating. And it's got kind of like the conceptual critique and satire going on that gives it some more depth that a lot of other similar products like Saw or whatever just don't have.
Savon.
It doesn't reinvent the wheel. It doesn't really do anything new, but it does everything extremely well. If you want to see a well-produced, well thought out, put together product, watch it. But content-wise, it's a downer, and that might be probably the weakest part of the show, is just the content's polarizing. So if you're not into something that's just very much a downer, there are no good vibes, good things don't happen to people, there's no silver lining in this, do not watch it.
I think there is.
Okay.
It's small, right? It like the whole thing, kind of like we talked about being like a zombie movie, is sort of always about what is humanity, right? Or like what does it take to be human, and what is it about the connections between people? And I think there's many moments, while all of the characters are flawed, we still see moments where humans in extraordinary circumstances find ways to preserve some of their humanity and some of their connections with people around them and to show that they care. And so I think that's the only small silver lining. But I think overall your point for sure still stands that like there's just a lot of like backstabbing and violence and people doing things because they're pressured into doing them and doing things like carrying out violence against other people, not because they're necessarily evil, but because the circumstances within which they find themselves sort of force them into making that choice.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that I'd really honestly critique with the show for real, is that the format of the show, because it's so honestly just done and been overdone a million times. It's for me, I actually had trouble caring about a lot of the characters because I just know you're not gonna win. Like we know that you're doomed, and like we know you're not the main character, so it's just like there was a part of me that was just kind of like, all right, let's get the ball rolling. We know you're not about to get this money. You know, like when you see the criminal do, it's like, all right, cool. You know his arc the moment you see his tattoo on his face. It's like, all right, cool. So he's gonna be a d- and then not win. Sorry, Wes.
But the sadistic part of us wants to know how they're gonna die.
Yeah, and it's like a journey, not the destination thing, and I get that.
Sure.
Now, I did appreciate that, but you know, I think that can be true, and it also the con of that is how much do I care about these people? There was a few character moments that I thought was just like, is what we're doing? Like the self-sacrifice thing? I was like, oh, okay. But
Right.
you know,
There
if we're
were
gonna
cliches.
split hairs.
There were cliches in there, but again, I think in the context of everything else and the way the show puts you in the character's shoes and really makes you feel like you could be making these decisions, those cliches don't seem so cliche because you can kind of see themselves in it. What I will say about this show being a winner is that it's a good old-fashioned binge. Every new show we've talked about on this show for the past year has been weekly. This is a show that benefits from being a binge because I think you get absorbed in that world, especially because they're going back to that room after every episode, so you feel like you're going back with them. There's like getting ready for the next game, and because you're able to, I think, watch more than one in a row, at least for me, that really contributes to just putting you in their shoes even more. And it's like same way, honestly, with Ted Lasso. I know they're polar opposite shows, but when you watch a few episodes of those, you get in the flow of everything and you really start to feel a part of that world. And with this, I really felt that. And at the end, it's almost sad that like it's over. Like I did feel pretty sad when this was over because I really enjoyed kind of being along that ride. And I locked my girlfriend out, so I need to go fix that right now.
Go save Anna. All right. Next question. Would you have changed anything about the show? Apparently, LeBron was caught talking with Anthony Davis about the show, and he wasn't a big fan of the ending. He thought that Ji-yoon should have made a different choice. Brian, we're going to go to you first.
I actually thought that the end of the show is pretty interesting. And I like that there was this kind of extended epilogue and rumination about, okay, what happens now having won. But aside from the ending, I will say that the biggest sticking point for me in this show was just the English-speaking actors who show up. It's during such like a pivotal moment, you know, in the last third of the show, and they all sound like they just walked off of the set of Rumble in the Bronx or something like that. I'm like, who are these white people that they find? Were these like tourists in Seoul and they stopped at a kiosk and somebody's like, hey, want to be in a show about a game? And they're like, yeah, sure, we got nothing else to do. That's what it sounded like. It's like, oh, I'm picking 69 on this one. Ha ha ha. Like, get out of here with that.
Yeah, the
mess.
writing for them was also very bad,
Ugh.
which I wonder if that was intentional to a point, and maybe it was just. It's kind of like I like Succession, you know. It's just like they write these rich characters to be so vapid and stupid and empty, and I wonder if there was a level of intentionality.
You
there
can get away with
those
satire that way. Yes.
Yeah.
It
But
didn't feel intentional.
It did pull me out of the.
Yeah.
It pulled me out of the experience for sure. And every time we went back to it, I was like, "Oh my god!" Because and part of it is because the Korean actors, the leads in this show, I think we're doing a phenomenal job for the most part.
So like
that's
in that
interesting.
moment.
Oh,
No, you go, Wes.
I was just going to say for the Korean actors, I thought they were all really good. The only thing that in the beginning I really had a hard time with the main character, I think it's Ji-yoon, I'm not sure how to say his name, but he was really whiny. Like, he was whiny with his mom, he was whiny with the people he owed money to, he was whiny with his friends, and it just like was really a turnoff. But by episode maybe 2 or 3, he's sort of calmed down a little bit, like once he's in the game and he's a little bit more mellow, and that's when you could sort of see his like dramatic chops come out more. It felt a little less pressed, I think. You know, in the first part he's just really over the top as like a whiny baby, and it was like, dude, you're 35, 40, 45, whatever, you have a daughter, like clearly things are not going your way, but that doesn't mean you get to whine about them. You're not.
He's a bum.
You're
That's
not
the point.
14.
Do you just hate him as a person?
Yeah, like, that's the point of his
Yeah,
character.
Is
Was
that
he's a
not the
bum.
point? Is that not the point? Because I
It is
have
the
this
point.
note later on, like they did, like everyone they highlighted, even in the beginning when it wasn't main characters at all. It wasn't just like, oh, something bad happened to me, or oh, like I'm poor. It was always people that made bad decisions or like evil decisions that kind of led them into massive amounts of debt. You don't agree? So I didn't really. That's
It's
what
just
it
not
felt
all
like.
of
It felt
them.
like you're in debt, like you gamble, blah 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 blah. It really seemed like they were trying to almost stop you from feeling empathy for the characters. And then one thing they did on top of that I think was really great. It wasn't only that it seemed like they were trying to push this narrative that these people put themselves in those situations. And I think it's one like device they did that was took the show to a whole nother level, was that everybody left and then they all chose to come back. If they didn't do that and it was just people came, then you're feeling almost pity for them, right? Because they didn't know what it was, blah blah blah. Once they did that episode of them leaving and coming back, it really makes it a bit harder to feel bad for people, because you genuinely knew what this was and chose to be here.
Yeah.
And now, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that's also like we're like the people running the show, because they know that like the people betting probably won't feel bad, and then we don't feel bad, and oh god, okay. I don't want to unpack this anymore.
When we come back to the capitalism art parallels later, I wanna respond to that, because
okay.
I think there's something in it there that makes sense. Cool.
Can I push back on one quick thing?
Yeah.
Well, only thing I'll push back on, Mike. Well, I do like that they made it to where people went back of their own free will, free-ish will. But I think they also did establish not every character is there because they made poor decisions. We have one character who is a North Korean fugitive. She's in very much like extenuating circumstances. Ali, the Pakistan immigrant, similar boat, right? He's clearly like a foreign who is maybe in like a shady situation where he can't go to the authorities. So like, I think my only pushback is that it's a mix. Some characters, it really is their victim of circumstance, while others, June being one of them, are actually more like you actually made your own mistakes and you kind of put yourself in this.
In the show, I don't think the hosts pointed them out, right? And we'd have to go back and check. But you remember early on in the show, like they put everyone up on the screen and talked about how they got there. Maybe I'm just thinking of that moment in particular, and that maybe that's like an in-world type of thing, is them trying to create that environment. Oh, and maybe the point of that is to get the people to feel more hostile to each other, because you don't feel pity for someone and you could throw them off the bridge. Look at us,
sympathy.
Unpacking, analysis, finding new threads, quality programming.
And I gotta say this one thing about the language piece. And I said it before, but like this is just, yes, were those English speaking dudes awful? Yes. But again, this show was not made with an American audience in mind. Almost every other production you have ever watched in your life that had people speaking a different language or representing a non-English speaking culture was probably represented in a mediocre manner. I know this as an American because anytime they do anything that happens in New Orleans, the accents are horrendous. And if that is me as an English speaker, I can only imagine what it's like people who don't speak English.
You mean you didn't appreciate when they had Old Bay on the table in New Orleans in Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Good God. That one wasn't super egregious, but, I'm even like, talk to someone who speaks Spanish about how they feel about the accents in Breaking Bad, right? Like people even say Gus's character, his accent is nothing like what his actual nationality is supposed to be. Like that's a huge critique of most shows that don't have English. So can we be upset and say it's trash? Sure. Also, we need to humble ourselves because we have not had to deal with this compared to everybody else.
Fair point. I wonder what Korean audiences think of Ali's character and whether or not like he gave a convincing performance.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, it was just so crazy that he was even in this kind of show.
Yeah, it's more it's kind of like it drives home the point that this show wasn't made with Americans in mind. Like, I'm sure if you're someone who lives in South Korea, it makes total sense that, you know, some of your immigrant population would be somebody who's from like Pakistan. I'm sure that maybe is representative of the demographics. But as an American, I had to kind of like, take a second to connect the dots real quick.
Savon just called us in for being American centric.
I mean, this is how it goes.
No, it's real.
Isn't that America's brand? Like
making everything about us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just,
So
oh my
do you
God, the
think
English
the
was so
guys-
bad.
Wasn't
you
part of
think-
the show that America is, or the world we live in is America centric?
Ooh. Yes, for sure.
I've reached the limit of my
sure.
analysis.
Mike and Savon, did you guys want to talk about things you would have changed, or should we move on? You guys
Yeah,
kind of
we
had the
can
same
move
idea
on.
here. Maybe one of you can explain it.
I think we could unpack this a bit more if you want, Savon. There was a few things that just weren't really connected to the overarching plot that it seems like it's setting up season 2, which is, I get it. Like, you kind of have to do that, especially I feel like maybe Netflix pushed part of that on it. The brother plot line, I hated all that. Like, I get why the cop serves as a way to see what's going on, but I just hated, and people that watch the show, and I'm not even going to dig into it that much, so it's not even that much of a spoiler, but all of that just seems so forced, and I guess as Savon was saying, like, kind of overplayed.
I don't know if there's anything major I would have really changed. I think for what they wanted to do and what the story's supposed to be, they did what they wanted. I would have liked maybe a more bow on the, tightly wrapped up bow ending. I don't really like the open-ended. I don't know if this is something that'll work for multiple seasons. So I kind of would have liked something a bit more the end. But that's more of a preference thing. I thought, it was good overall for what they wanted it to be.
Would you guys this is spoilers, so it's okay. I mean, if we reveal that, like, the Ilnam is right, the guy behind these games, would you have liked more hints or more intrigue as to who was behind the games throughout? Or did you like it sort of just coming out of the blue? Like, I think it would have been slightly different or maybe more interesting if, like, there was also this running question of who's behind the games.
I think there was a running question, and that was through the detective story, essentially, right? Like, he's the one going behind the game and going through all those doors and trying to see what's behind them. So I think there is a little bit of a question of okay, who is pulling all the strings here? And so, like, I still think that's there, and that mystery is kind of driving some of the show. But I do like that it's not a primary focus of the show, because I think the reveal at the end is less about, who is pulling the strings, but rather, like, what is his motivation behind it. And so, like, that has very much to do with the relationship that Ilnam has with Jiyeon during the course of playing the game, and then how they kind of talk about it at the very end, and what that means for their differing visions of humanity. So I think it worked.
Do you think the show could have worked if they just truly left the host and the people running it nameless, faceless? They're nobody, they don't matter. Could that have worked at all? Or do you feel like we needed to have the detective plot line leading up to the brother and all of that? My gut says season 1 could have worked without that, and it might have honestly been better for it. But if the show, maybe season 2 won't be as much about the specific games, like maybe we're going like a lost direction where it's going to turn into a whole different thing. I would have liked, and I guess like this is to answer what I would have liked to change, is them staying nameless, faceless, nobody, and it's not about them.
Yeah, in a way, that's a stronger satire, right?
Yeah.
It's just the system or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
that system
That's what I was
is.
gonna say.
And I think it works in other movies. Like this show reminded me of another Netflix movie, The Platform, I think it's called. Have you guys seen that?
No, I never
And
heard of it.
it's like a crazy movie. There's like 500 floors of some hotel, and a person's on a different floor, and there's a platform of food that descends from the top level all the way to the bottom. And so if you're on the bottom, you basically have all the scraps and causes all this anarchy. Anyway, in that movie, no idea who's doing that or why they're running it or how they're running it. But it works as social commentary.
Cool. All right. Let's keep it rolling. Next question. I and many other people felt like there were a lot of analogies going on in this show between the competition aspect and the survival and this like super hyper capitalistic systems that we have in place both in Asia and in the US and in Western Europe, things like that. What parallels did you guys see? Savon, did you want to get us started on this one, or do you want to kind of wait it out?
You saying what parallels we have just to capitalism in general in the show?
Yeah, and like how did you feel they successfully pulled them off or didn't successfully pull them off? Did it make you like want to consider some of these things?
Honestly, no. I didn't really even think about this as capitalism a lot because I try to remind myself that the theme of being broke and struggling has existed pre-capitalism. And, you know, a story like this could exist in, I think, hypothetically any society. But, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was more about the struggle and how the struggle can just turn people into absolute animals. And you watch people really revert into their base form and become these worst versions of yourself when people are backed against the wall, right? I think that was the biggest takeaway I had. But I don't think of that as a capitalist critique. I just think about that as just, I don't know, life is hard, the plight of humanity. Sometimes you got to survival of the fittest. And what does that look like? And this was a very gritty interpretation of what it looks like. But, you know, that's one thing I'll give them. You know, it's people, you see what people are willing to throw away when their back's against the wall.
I do feel like, though, they did try and make it very, maybe if it's not explicitly capitalism, but just the ultra competitive culture in Korea. And I do think that is kind of connected to capitalism, and especially with, you know, how crazily fast their economy has grown and the impact of the few companies that have such a huge, you know, force in the country. And I feel like maybe starting with the people in debt is kind of like that exists in a capitalistic society where other people are going to enrich themselves by you suffering, and then the things people have to do. Like, is it different, like, for me have to work for an unlivable wage at McDonald's versus me having to do that? Like, and I feel like that was kind of the capitalistic part. It's like dehumanizing people because they've been put in situations where they can't afford to live because of the capitalist system. So you're right. Maybe that could have happened in feudalism and like a serf, or like, you know, my people in a potato farm. Like, you could have done the Shtetl games rather than Squid Games.
The hyper competitive South Korean part, I 100% agree on. Like, I think that is a lot more on the nose than just capitalism bad, although you could make an argument for both. But yeah, I agree with you.
But
this is going to become like a capitalist apologist podcast.
Just believe in a free market.
It drives innovation.
The golden hand.
Confidently Wrong, brought to you by Ayn Rand.
Oh my gosh. The worst.
Just like that.
I think that ultra competition really is derived, though, from the wanting to get rich now mentality that is driving all these people, you know, both in real life and within the context of Squid Game, right? Like, they're flashing that giant piggy bank that's filling up full of cash, like just lots of cash, and they're putting cash dollars behind every single contestant that dies, and you just see like people's eyes light up as it's coming down. And they're like, oh, my God, I really don't want to kill these people, but I could get all of that cash, that life-changing cash. So to me, it's a little bit more than just survival and survival of the fittest. It's about money. And I think that's driven home through, you know, Jian, you know, seeing his life pre-Squid Game, trying to gamble and win money off of horse racing and betting and being indebted to gangsters because he's got a gambling problem and all this stuff just related to cash. But I also think what's interesting is that the show takes it a step further, and it's not just like the contestants who are pitted against each other and scrapping, just like working class people fighting each other for bits of money. But it's also the fact that Sunwoo, or whatever his name is, Jiun's childhood friend, is like a banker or something, and he's caught in this mess too, right? Like he's somebody with means who is also in a capitalistic fight. And then you have the people running the Squid Game, our maskless pink hoodie friends, right? Like they follow a very strict hierarchy. And then there are elements, and then you see what their lives are like as well. Like they're put into cells, they have very strict times that they, schedules that they have to follow. And then some people are trying to scam the game and, trying to run their own operation in the shadows and try to profit off of it, and they get killed. So that there's a lot of that going on. And then you have like the guy who's running the show, even he answers to somebody, right? When all the English speaking rich people come in, and he has to speak in English to communicate with them. So I think there's just a lot of levels that are coming across in the show. And I think ultimately it really is about sort of the systemic subjugation that we all have to live under, right? Like everybody answers to somebody, and we're all kind of like bowing down to whatever that power might be.
Yeah, I think that systemic part is really important. So the contestants in the show are in this place, and Mike said that like in some ways you can tell that it's their choices that they've made that have put them in this precarious position where they're over leveraged and they need some way out, right? They need some kind of hope and some way out. But we see this all the time in American society where we say like, well, you have the same opportunities as everybody else, right? Like you had access to American education, you have yada, 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 yada. And then people who don't make it get blamed for them not making it. But you also realize, right, in the work that some of us have done is that like, yeah, you live in America, and so that comes with certain privileges, but you also live under a system in which like some of those things don't actually seem possible, right? Like some of the kids that we teach or taught don't have like a viable path where they can actually see themselves like rising to a different level socioeconomically or whatever. And it's because they haven't, like in so many cases, like one little slip up and the whole thing crumbles for them, right? Or a series of mistakes that wouldn't trip up you or I coming from middle or upper class backgrounds. One small thing can lead to a whole domino effect of like, oh, I'm out of money. I can't pay the light bill. Now I can't do this thing. And now I can't do that thing. I can't pay for my community college. And like, boom, it's done.
Or like, I feel like if Squid Games took place in America, it'd be like a bunch of people with like master's degrees in English literature or something like that, where it's like, oh, the whole society is telling you like, you need to go get a college degree. And then when you get a college degree, you're like, well, why do you spend all that money on a college degree? Like, I'm not going to hire you. So I agree. Like, I think that maybe the decisions isn't the point they're making and giving like people that actually made decisions is to try to take a step back and think about decisions that are kind of forced upon you that
right
with
like these people, they were so far in debt and so far behind, quote unquote, behind the rest of the society that like they were literally saying, what choice do we have? We can do the games and die, or maybe have one small chance at winning the money, or we could go back out into the real world where everything is crap. Yeah. And we have no opportunities and we can't make it ahead. What's the point in living like that? Right. And I think that's the point at which it became clear that this was more than just like, oh, you had made gambling choices, you were a gambling addict. It was more about like, these people felt like they did not have choices out in the like quote unquote real world. And so the only way out is like this just pie in the sky moonshot that like, it's why like people blame poor people for like playing the lottery. They're like, why are you wasting your money on the lottery? You know you have no shot at winning. And it's like, they're like, well, what else am I supposed to do? I'm just going to buy these J's. I'm going to buy my lottery ticket. I'm going to live my life, right? And like, that's it. It's like, what chance do you have to really save up your money and make it to the next level? Like, I get that on some level when people are just like, nah, man, you're telling me to like participate in the system that is fundamentally broken and doesn't provide the opportunities that like I need to actually get to where I need to be. So like, F it, like.
But it's interesting that given all that, which I agree with, they went out of their way to make the main character so unlikable in the beginning.
Yeah.
I actually thought he was very likable in the beginning. I was totally in as soon as his story unfolded, because even though he's making bad decisions, he still has so much character and like charm and just like kinetic energy that you kind of want to see where it goes. But yeah, I mean, like he's still kind of like putting himself in this rut.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's nuance to all this. They established that the main character still suffers from PTSD because of the stuff that happened at his old job. They talk about how his company was mismanaged by the leadership, the rich people, and they got laid off. Even when characters have made poor decisions and a lot of their own mistakes, you can still frame it in the larger context of, not everybody had control over the circumstances that happened to them. And the show, and specifically the old man, people really like to drive home the idea that, oh, you made your own choice. You made your own choice. And, this show really asks you the question of, how much of a choice do you really have? What really is a free will choice? If someone says, you think about leverage, like, it's not really a choice if somebody has zero leverage. Hey, Savon, here, do this unspeakable thing, or here's $1 million and we'll pay off your debt. It's like, oh, you have a choice. Well, do you have a choice? Like, do you really have a choice? And maybe in the most technical sense, but when you think about just life and reality, you don't. And, this show really unpacks that, because the people went back. Episode 2 was amazing because the people went back to their lives and you see where it goes and you realize they don't really have a choice. In fact, the main character, he essentially had no choice. So, I don't know. You can be upset at characters because some were born into tough circumstances, some dug their own grave, but when it's all said and done, people did not have choices the way that maybe we think they did.
And that was 100%.
I feel like I like this. I feel like I like this show a lot more now, having talked about it, because I was just like, "Oh, what's gonna happen?" Like, "Oh, people."
Oh God.
All right, well, let's wrap it up there, friends. Let us know how you felt about it. Are we reading too much into this? Are we not reading enough? Are we missing an angle that the filmmakers would have wanted us to consider? Let us know in the comments. Miles, I know you got something for us. Let us know how it went. Will, if you were listening out there, I know you've got something on it. And Alan, you said you're about to finish it, so hit us up on Instagram. You can also hit us up on Twitter at confidently_pod. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, tell your friends about our show. We've been working really hard to make it good. We know we've got a few upgrades coming down the road here. So go ahead and let us know. We're out.